Hi, everyone. I'm Rex Saldana, and I'm back with my good friend Mark Stevens for another Eurythmics podcast. And this time we have a very, very special podcast. We are so excited to have Kristin Korb join us. Hi, Kristin.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Kristin
Hey,
is an
Chris.
American jazz double bassist and vocalist, and who has been putting out wonderful jazz albums for about 25 years now, right, Kristin?
Yep.
And her most recent album is a collection of Eurythmics covers reimagined in a jazz styling. And speaking as a Eurythmics fan, I think it's wonderful. And I can't wait to discuss this album with Kristin and Mark. So welcome, Kristin.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and it just came out this past week, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, and you've been
After some pre-singles were put out and all that, and
Yep.
very
yeah
nice.
the
Well,
new way I do it music. You tease it for a while, don't you?
Yeah, we actually started teasing singles. Well, we had a couple live things that came out from a performance I did a year ago in September in Copenhagen. So those were like teased out like in March or something. And then we started actually releasing the official singles in June.
Oh, well, and now we're in the fall. Yeah. So
Yeah.
well, I just wanted to give a little background to everybody on
yeah.
Kristin. She studied at Eastern Montana College and the University of California at San Diego. And this part is very interesting. She studied with Ray Brown, whom she made her recording debut in 1996. Now, Ray Brown, if you know jazz, you know Ray Brown. So I want Kristin, tell us a little bit about Ray, working with him, and how that all happened.
That was an amazing life-changing experience.
I'll bet.
I was doing my master's at University of California, San Diego, like you said, and I found out that Ray played San Diego every year. And I was like, oh, I have to get a lesson with this guy. This is, it's jazz history. He's the father of modern bass playing, and I really want to know what he thinks about music and how I could be better. So I go up to him the first year that I'm in town, and I shake his hand, and he just feels my calluses and says, "You need to practice more." Oh, all right. Well, I bought a CD and went on my way, and then spent the next year like reading everything I could about him. What does he think? What does he do? What's, anything I could find out. And so I came up to him the following year and got a bass lesson from him. And out of that bass lesson came my first CD introducing Kristin Korb with the Ray Brown Trio. And of course, with it being his trio, he played bass and I just sang. But I was lucky enough to get a week with him in St. Louis as a part of like the CD coming out. And so he would bring me up for the last two or three songs of the set, and then we would share the bass together.
Wow. That
Yeah.
must have just blown you away to have that as your first album working with him, for that to happen. And
Yeah, it was pretty freaky. It's
now
it
when he said your callus, you needed to practice more, I would think that because you had the calluses, that means you were practicing quite a bit.
well, I
What
think
was he meaning by that?
they were pretty soft, is what he just kind of like,
Oh,
feels your fingers and goes, yeah, you're not ready.
you needed harder calluses.
Yes, yeah. And
Okay, well,
How are they today?
they're like leather, man.
Okay.
Just yeah.
I would imagine.
25 years on. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll
Well,
never be a hand model, I'll put it like that. You'll appreciate this. Check it out. So like with bass players, because the left hand we're, putting into the strings, the right hand doesn't get used very much. I don't know if that, can you see
oh
that?
yeah. Yeah, you can see. It doesn't really look on the video, it doesn't really look callus like a callus. It just looks slightly bigger.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
wow. Well, okay, so explain what a double bassist. What does that
It
mean exactly?
well, the double bass, it's the big bass, upright bass,
Oh, okay. So
contrabass.
it's the instrument.
Yeah, it's the instrument.
Okay.
So,
Wow. Okay. I'm naive Rex. Okay. Sorry.
oh, that's totally cool. That's
Yeah.
You're not the
Well,
only person that's ever asked that.
no,
So,
I'm sure. Yeah. But it's funny. I listen to a lot of jazz music and always have. Um, but when, when rock is is what you first started on, and then as you get older, you get into other things, and I've learned to appreciate jazz and all sorts of other genres now. But I don't know that I'm comfortable enough to speak about the mechanisms of jazz, especially with a jazz person. It's kind of like I know what I love and I know what I like to listen to, but
Yeah.
that sounds
Well,
weird,
at
but
the end of the day, that's what's important. You want to
hmm,
listen to the stuff that brings you joy,
right.
And for me, I grew up as listening to country western
Me
and,
too.
then pop tunes. And I remember when MTV started, and, my junior high years were like on the beanbag in the family room, you know,
I
fighting
know.
for my space and just grooving to the videos.
I know. I remember I carved out MTV time before school every day.
Oh yeah.
It was like a 30-minute window where I had to watch it before I went every day. But Mark mentioned something interesting about uh, listening to your album of Eurythmics covers. Um, you put it on, and it just sort of, what was the word you used, Mark? It kind of envelops you, and you're
Mhm.
drawn into it.
Yeah. I just over the last few days just sort of preparing for this. At one point I would go and I would play a song, and and then I'd go back and then I'd play a song. But and then I found yesterday, I just started playing the album, and as I let it play, I just found it really interesting, and it just it moved into each song very effortlessly, and I enjoyed
Mhm.
listening to it. And it really did. It sort of kind of made you feel that you were in a different space. I really liked it. It was very
I
good.
Oh,
like it
thank
too.
you.
I have to say I'm not fond of a lot of Eurythmics covers, but I'm really fond of this. And
Well,
I
Chris, the interesting thing is, I think you've done something. I'm almost certain you've done something that no one has ever done before. Now, there are a lot of people, a lot of groups, a lot of artists uh, who have covered Eurythmic songs, Annie Lennox songs. I don't think anyone has ever made an entire album that's dedicated to the work of Eurythmics and Annie Lennox. I think you've done something no one has ever done. Now, did you know you were doing that?
Well, the project was it came out of a festival I played a year ago. I was invited to this international festival, and the theme was famous duos. So, like
oh,
Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong was a duo. Billie Holiday and Lester Young was a duo. So these other things like got taken, and so there was like Simon and Garfunkel as well, and the Carpenters. And when I saw the Eurythmics on the list, I was like, hmm. This is interesting because I enjoyed them as a teenager, but it was also at that same time when I was getting into the Eurythmics and getting into, watching my MTV. I also heard jazz. And when I started getting into the jazz thing, it just pulled me in so deep and hard that I didn't have as much time to follow the Eurythmics and
Mhm.
pop music as a kid. It was just so
right.
weird. Like it just hit me in a way like it was so visceral with jazz, like being able
Yeah,
to improvise and play exactly what I was feeling and
right.
and playing the bass, at the same time as singing in choir, really just excited me. And so I just went down that rabbit hole. But when I saw that on the list for the festival, I was like, I know them, but I don't know them.
Mhm.
Right. So I could sing along with some of the tunes. And I thought, and I had just stripped away like the music. And I just thought, let me just look at the titles.
Mhm.
'Cause to me, the vocalist in me, I want to tell a story. I
Mhm.
want to communicate something. And, it's through the words. So then I looked at the titles and I kind of like, oh, I remember the song or I remember that. And then I would look at the lyrics. I was like, oh, here's some good stories. And, the world is kind of a crazy place right now. And I just thought, you know what? There's a lot of positivity in these lyrics.
Mhm.
And I think I want to go down that rabbit hole and just see what I can do through adult eyes, taking this material. And as a jazz musician, and it's like, as we've talked with the MTV, they had all those unplugged concerts, like
Mm,
as you got into the late 80s. And so
yeah,
I was thinking, like, well, what if I did it from that approach of really stripping it down to the essential stories, those good melodies, not trying to be Annie Lennox or Dave Stewart, and just really bringing these stories to life in a way that is a loving tribute, but also is me.
right. You said something which struck me. You said there's a lot of positivity in the songs, and that is true. Eurythmic songs are often melancholy or is presented as you know, maybe sometimes angry, melancholy, sad. But within all of that, there is such a positivity within that. You get a sense of that from whatever song you're, even if it's a sad song about something, there's a positivity in there. And I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that before about the positivity within the lyrics. And that's very key, I think, to understanding Eurythmics and
Well,
the way they
and,
write the songs.
and that's interesting because Dave and Annie would talk about, even if you talk about the iconic song that Sweet Dreams Are Made of This, that, the lyrics were rather foreboding, actually, and that Dave at one point when they were writing it said, we need to do something. And that's how they came up with the hold your head up, keep your head up, moving on, because they needed to take that and have this element of
Right.
positivity. And so that's really interesting. We should say, by the way, I don't think we said Kristin's album is called Sweet Dreams.
Sweet Dreams, yes. Yes, and quickly run down the track listing before we talk about some of the tracks, but she's done Sweet Dreams, There Must Be an Angel, Here Comes the Rain Again, We Two Are One, and kudos for covering that one, and I love your version of it. When Tomorrow Comes, Sisters Are Doing It for Themselves, I Saved the World Today, I've Got a Life, Don't Let It Bring You Down, Would I Lie to You, Put a Little Love in Your Heart, and the last one, Lifted, which is one of Mark and I's most favorite songs. In fact, I've been saying for years, that is the song I want played at my funeral, which hopefully won't be for many years. But really great that you picked that song because it's kind of an obscure one, yet really loved by a lot of the fans.
Oh, it's a gorgeous tune. And man, it's so epic what Annie does on that with the don't be a don't, where she breaks into that whole choral thing. It's just like, oh my gosh.
Mhm.
It just,
And
it's a,
do you sense sort of it has sort of a funereal march, kind of a funeral marching feel to it, almost like you're in those funeral marches in New Orleans, that dun dun
yeah.
dun dun, that's something I got out of it. I don't know if that's valid. I mean, what do you think about that? Do you think that's uh
You're,
do you
you're
think
talking about the original.
the original, yeah, not, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm talking about the Eurythmics version had sort of a like a New Orleans funeral procession feel to it.
Yeah.
That's what I got from it.
Yeah.
Was I
Well,
wrong or was I off base or
no, I totally, I could see that absolutely.
okay, yeah,
And I
because
think a lot of those things too, like when you were just saying earlier with the positivity in the middle of the darkness. I mean, that's very much the tradition of the blues, which is the beginning of jazz, where
exactly.
it's acknowledging the things that are difficult in this world. And by approaching that head on and working through it, that keeping your head up, that moving on, moving through it, not avoiding it or pretending like things don't suck, but
Right.
just that process of moving through things. I
Mhm.
mean, that's very blues tradition. So to go a step and say, New Orleans Funeral March, I think that totally would fit because that's where the tradition started.
Yeah, well, and I think everybody knows that, Eurythmics have their root, their root is in the blues and soul and all that. So let's talk about some of the tracks on the album and like what you've done with them. I want Mark, do you want to start with something or do you want me to
I
keep
do, but
rambling here?
I want to go back to something that you just said, Kristin, how you approached how you were going to do these songs. And you said that you looked at the titles. And this is very interesting because we just did a podcast 10 years ago. Annie Lennox released what is at the moment her last album called Nostalgia, which was a covers album. of the Great American Songbook, a lot of jazz in there. But one thing she said, how she approached this was, she admits this was not a catalog that she was completely familiar with, and that she went and she looked at what titles drew her in. So I thought that was very interesting that you sort of approached this same project from that sort of same way. And I do want to ask you real quick too. There are two songs that are somewhat, or Annie Lennox cover versions. Well, Annie Lennox covering "Don't Let It Bring You Down," and then of course put a little love in your heart. So you'll have to talk about how you chose those as well. But once you picked the titles, then you went into, okay, how am I going, which ones you were going to, when you listen to the songs, like you said, you knew some of them already, just from, you didn't grow up with MTV and not know who Eurythmics were. But, you know, just tell us just a little bit real quick too, how you, after you went through those titles and you listened to the songs, what drew you to the ones you picked?
Lyrics. It's the story.
And lyrics is always for me too. Yeah, but go ahead.
It's all about the story. So I took those stories, and then I live right across the street from a forest. So I would put the headphones on, and you know, as my list started out quite large, and then as it was started to whittle down, I would go out in the forest and just put the headphones on and listen to these songs over and over again, and think, is there another way in to this song? You know, like for me, if I'm going to perform this, who am I singing to? What is this for? What's my angle on that story? Because sometimes stories can be very sometimes literal, sometimes they can be from another angle. They can be sarcastic or poignant, or looking back on things. You know, so I was trying to take these songs and what could my approach be? And then I just wrote out, when I came back to the house, I wrote out lead sheets where it was just the melody and the lyrics and basic chord structures that I could hear off the recordings. And, you know, for some of these songs, I know, like, you know, the intro to Sweet Dreams, for example, is so iconic, right? And a lot of these, I mean, Dave Stewart obviously spent so much time putting all those layers in, and to do that at a time where the multi-track recording wasn't really happening, and the fact that he was able to engineer all that is just absolutely brilliant. But I thought, well, I love extractions. I want to give like the feeling of something without being literate. And every version I listened to of Sweet Dreams had that same exact intro. And I thought, you know, everybody knows that intro. So what if I hint at it and let our ears fill in the spaces?
Yeah.
So
that's
for
what you
me,
did.
that was really fun to just kind of go, okay, instead of you know, and then I was also listening to like some, at the time, just randomly listening to the wonderful tenor saxophone player Eddie Harris. And so it's all kind of soul jazz, and so I heard like about two or three different songs of his that I decided to flesh out and build Sweet Dreams into a big open solo section where the horn players can really just go crazy. And it's fun to play, and it really requires everybody in the band to be themselves and to interpret what that means to them.
Yeah, that's great. I love that interpretation. That's fantastic. I love the idea that you approach this, that how do I make it my own? How do I not just do another cover of Sweet Dreams? Now, were you, was that daunting to, not only cover a Eurythmics song, because, you know, these are two of the greatest pop musicians they're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they're in the Songwriters Hall of Fame, they're in the UK Music Hall of Fame. So it's daunting to say, okay, I'm going to cover one of their songs. Again, Kristin, you've made an album that you've covered. Oh, I want to know if that was daunting at all, or were you comfortable in that? What about that?
Well, I didn't even know I was going to do an album when I started doing these arrangements. It was just for this festival, right? And so like I I followed my curiosity.
Yeah.
No, and I think, because Annie's voice is so iconic and she's so powerful, and my voice is completely different from hers, that, to try to just be her or to try to have that power, I need to find where my own power is. And I think like as a human being, I get that feeling from her, in the things that I've seen her, out there in the world. It's like we've all got our own power and it's ours, so we need to find where those places are. And in playing with these arrangements, I I felt like, I want to follow my curiosity. I want to see where this goes. I want to see what happens. And then when we performed it, we did like a test concert in Copenhagen before I went to this festival, and we made a video of it because I thought, well, educationally, I want to see, see what it looks like, hear what it sounds like, um, what needs to be tweaked before this we go out, before I go to this festival. Do I need to change the arrangements at all? Because I only had one rehearsal with my band in Copenhagen before the concert,
Oh, oh.
and the guys were like, "Well, this is cool, but like, are you sure this is like all new material?" And I was like, "No, I want to do this. I got to do this. I think it's going to be cool," but I was unsure. Like, jazz people have this image a lot of times of what they think jazz music is. And then, pop fans not necessarily knowing what the jazz approach might be. So it was kind of like this bold thing, but I didn't feel like I was being bold. I was just having fun with things.
Mhm.
But when we did the concert, it was sold out and people were dancing in the room. They were singing along with the songs. Um, Jazz
Mm.
people were bringing their pop friends, their pop loving friends in, and it, it was just the most amazing experience. Bringing these different people together to enjoy and celebrate, Annie Lennox and Dave Stewart, and everybody's memories, of when they were teenagers and what were they doing when they first heard these songs. And um, it just blew me away, the response.
It must have been so much validation for you.
It was, and then I was like,
Mhm.
I have to record this.
Yeah.
I have to do that. I can't just let this go away.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
um, that seems like a natural segue to talk about some of the songs on the album. I made a few notes here of some of the things that I noticed while I was listening that I thought I'd bring up. On There Must Be an Angel, and also on some of the other songs too. Is that a recorder that's being used?
It's a harmonica.
Oh,
It's
it's
a
an actual
chromatic
harmonica.
harmonica. Yeah, Matthias Heise
Oh,
is amazing.
Yeah.
oh,
He's
wow.
Yeah, he's like 31. I met him when I first moved to Denmark, and he was just out of school, and I mean, he's something else.
Yeah,
He
it's got a great sound. It's got a
Well,
great
there's another there isn't that another thing. You have him, and of course he's covering the Stevie Wonder part of There Must Be an Angel. So the two of you,
sound.
it's bold. I'm telling you, it's good, but it's so good. It's really good.
Yeah. The
Um,
uh the drum solo on There Must Be an Angel. Wow. That's great. I loved
Yes.
that. And unexpected, you know.
Well, it's, when it's got that kind of more of that samba feel, that
Uh,
Brazilian thing,
yeah,
and
yeah.
to me, like percussion drives so much of that music. And and I thought, well, if this were to be a tune that was, original to Brazil or whatever, or in that tradition or in that spirit of,
Yeah.
the party, you
And
know?
it translates very well that way, doesn't it? It's very interesting how so many of these songs, well, actually all of these songs, translate so well. Like We Two Are One, your jazz version of it sounds so natural. Like this is the way it was originally. Like wow. And I think that's a testament not only to your interpretive abilities, but to Dave and Annie's songwriting and their arrangements as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just love that. Um,
I was
I have
curious.
more songs I can talk about, but Mark, you can say something now.
I was curious on There Must Be an Angel. The one thing that you didn't do, and there's a lot of scatting, if I'm right, on your album, but you didn't take that little scat opening and that in essence closing. La, I'm not going to do it. La Dottie, I'm not going to do it.
I'm not going to do it
But
either.
you didn't. And I'm curious if you thought, okay, this sort of iconic opening again, did you purposely not want to do that? Did you say, I'm going to try this? And there's no wrong or right answer to it. I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, she has so many layers that she sings, like in the choices on the songs, and not just that one, but there's so many like, okay, you know, like, well, for the intro, I wanted it to be the harmonica because to wait, like when Stevie Wonder comes in, it's like two-thirds of the way through the song.
Right. Yeah.
And to me, I wanted to cover the story and let the harmonica do that line because
Mhm.
Annie could cover all those horn things. I mean, she could have played flute on it for,
Right.
could have made that decision. So like for me to give Matthias that bit of the melody, then he could be more present throughout the whole song.
Yeah.
And so we could kind of split the duties. And then, when you get to the chorus, my thought was that the, my singing of the chorus was more of a background or part of a conversation with the piano solo.
Mm.
Like he's soloing, but that must be talking to an angel. Oh, what are you saying there? Oh, here's, must be talking to an angel. Then the
Mm.
piano sets that call and response that
Yeah.
then opens up into the solo section.
I love that. I love that. And I love that that there is this confidence in doing that, and and having that call and response, and with your instrumentalist too. I mean, and that you're giving that, like, okay, let's see what we can do, everybody. That's the beautiful thing about what you did. And as you said, Matthias, is it
Uh-huh.
Matthias? And isn't he on 4 or 5 of the tracks, I think? I mean,
Yeah.
he really. And then but I think that's one of the things that Dave and Annie always did well, and live and in the studio with a lot of different musicians from time to time. They wanted them to shine. That there was never some worry, and this is well documented with their players and with their instrument, that they let them shine, because there was no worry about, okay, they're gonna over overshine us. And I like that about what you've done with this album. And I don't think you can be a musician or a singer that you don't want everybody in the room that's with you to shine.
I'm the bass player part of me is like, okay, I'm the hostess of the party, and I want everybody to have a good time.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to lay the foundation so people can play whatever they're feeling, and having those conversations, it makes it more fun for everybody. I mean, it's fun for us to play that way. It's fun for us to listen to as listeners. It brings people into the moment when they hear it live, because then
Mm-hmm.
the audience becomes another member of the band.
Yeah.
They're part of that conversation as well.
Yeah. Do you have one song that you're out of your 12 that was a favorite from the get-go? I've got to do this. That's always the hard question. My wife does this to me all the time. What's your favorite thing? I'm like, oh, the favorite question.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, which child is your favorite? I mean, I love all of them for different reasons,
Yeah.
because I think they each have their own characteristics that make them unique from the other tunes.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I knew I wanted to do Sweet Dreams because you can't not do that. And I did because there's so many versions already out there that I feel like are relatively the same. I wanted to do my own thing that would be different.
Mhm.
Here Comes the Rain Again. I have so many memories as a kid of that.
Yeah.
Um, so I wanted to do that.
Yeah.
Um,
My favorite song ever, Here Comes the Rain Again. So
Me too.
you've
Yeah. We
done it
should touch
well.
on
Thank
that.
you. I
Yes.
think there's something about that in the original song that, there's so, and Kristin, you keep talking about it too, but there's so many elements to Eurythmics music. In Here Comes the Rain Again in the original, you have this insane, beautiful string arrangement, and you have these different elements. At one point there's in the background the shoo up kind of thing. And so when I talk about that song, I said, okay, there's 5 seconds of the song, and then it changes, and then there's something else, and then every few seconds there's some new thing. And so I think, and what's interesting about, and again, I'm like Rex, jazz is not my genre, but listening to jazz and listening especially to your album, it's what I get from that again. It is those so many elements to the music and different types of instrumentation and how you layer it with different things. And I think that's one of the things that Dave and Annie always did really well. And you've talked about that already. So I'm just, I just think you've touched into something that they've always done well, and you've taken that same kind of experience and done it your way.
Mhm. Mhm. On Here Comes the Rain Again, on your version, Kristen, what I really like is your phrasing on that song and the way you draw the lyrics out. I really like that, especially since you know, and this is not to say anything negative about Annie's performance, which of course is fantastic, but hers is a little more like kind of straight, and I don't want to say monotone, but it's more like, it's kind of straight and steady. Whereas you have this phrasing and you draw it out, and so you've done something different with that, and I really appreciated that about it.
Thank
I
you.
really
Well, and I
enjoyed
think too, it's like age. It's, being older and kind of having life experiences where, you know, wanting a love that's, or maybe a relationship that has split or not.
that.
There's a jazz tune called Talk to Me. And, it's like, talk to me. Nancy King has got a version you should check out. It's just, it's like,
Oh, well, yeah, I'm gonna check that
everything
out.
is, you don't talk to me. We used to have this great thing, and now you don't talk anymore. So just talk to me. And the way
Oh,
Nancy King sings it, it's just, you can tell like she's tasting the words.
Mhm.
And in the back of my mind somewhere, I felt like with my version of Here Comes the Rain Again, it's kind of like, the Danish coastline. Um, it's raining, the wind is blowing. You're, it doesn't have to be that hard. Just we can have these things. We really
Mhm.
can. We have to take care of it. We can't take these things for granted,
Right.
mm.
you
We
That
know?
should
I
mention
think
that.
that sums up my love of that song better than I summed it up.
No,
Right.
but we all have our stories, and that's the beautiful thing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's the beauty of music.
I think we should mention that you're in Denmark. You live in Denmark now. You just
I,
mentioned the Danish seashore. So I don't think we had mentioned that.
Yeah.
no, yeah, I
Oh
moved
wow.
here in 2011. I fell in love with a Viking, and you can't resist a Viking. So,
Well, I'm gonna be in Copenhagen in April.
oh, nice.
We're doing a whole tour of Scandinavia, Norway countries and all that. So maybe you'll be performing at that time and I can come and see you. Or we could have a cup of coffee.
Yeah,
You
for sure.
you
Let me know. Let me know, and
you
we'll
are
get.
going on a tour, aren't you? Don't you have a tour coming up?
I did a big West Coast tour in September,
Okay.
um,
Oh,
from like San Diego all the way up to Vancouver, British Columbia,
Oh wow.
um, which was so much fun. It was
Yeah.
really great.
I live in
Uh,
the San Francisco area. I'm in the San Francisco
oh,
Bay Area.
I was at Piedmont Pianos in Oakland.
Oh my gosh, really? Oh wow.
Yeah, and I did a thing with the Quest to College with the students
Yeah.
there.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, the Questa kids. We did like a little version of Lifted, and we closed
Oh,
Wow.
the concert and they sang background parts, and it was really, really
This
nice.
was going on and I didn't even know it. Ah!
Yeah. Well,
gotta
I'm
get.
working on October of next year. I'm coming through. I've actually well, I haven't really shared this with anybody so much, but yeah, you guys get it first. We're working on big band arrangements of these arrangements.
Wow. Oh,
Oh, wow, that's
And
even more
that
interesting.
would be October of
Ah,
wow.
next.
you
So
heard it here, folks.
so that will be like all over the US and perhaps some other places. So
Okay, that sounds really exciting and very interesting. Wow. Um, Another song I wanted to bring up, When Tomorrow Comes. Wow. That's
It's
a kind of a,
really well done. Yeah,
yeah,
you did a great
extremely
job.
well done, extremely well done. And it's like you've turned it into sort of a ballad. It sort of was a ballad, but it was more of a raucous kind of, it was more of a heavy rock thing. But it just that's what I have to say about your versions of these songs. They flow so natural. They seem so natural. Um, when you hear a lot of Eurythmics covers over the years, like I said earlier, I'm not usually fond of a lot of Eurythmics covers because they don't usually do anything new but you have done really something special here, Kristin. This is I'm Mr. Gushing here. This is amazing stuff.
thank you. Well, but I mean, when you think about the lyrics, though, right? Underneath your dreamlit eyes, shades
Mhm.
of sleep have driven you away. The moon
It
outside.
it seems like it would lend itself to that.
I
To it,
just saw those lyrics and I was just like, well, how would I say this? Who am I talking to? Is this like whispering over the pillow?
right.
You
Mhm.
know?
Right. That's kind
But
of I always
tomorrow,
thought it was always a conversation between two people and laying in bed, you know, or thoughts while you're laying with somebody. And she talks, of course, about the pillow and your dreamlit eyes but yeah, for those who haven't heard the album or the songs, check that one out especially because it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
well, and Magnus York, my piano player, he's just he's one of the great accompanists.
I
So
feel
he
like
knows
we should shout out some of your accompanists on the album, and I'll let you pronounce the names. Uh, Carl Martin,
Almqvist,
okay, and then there's Matthias Heise,
Matthias Heise.
Matthias Heise, okay. Um, Steen Nikolai Hansen,
Yep.
Nikolai, okay.
Fly on trombone.
Carl Steen, yeah. I think that's it, huh? Oh, and
Johann
I don't think I got
Ramon,
him.
Cuban, he's on percussion. And
Oh,
then my
okay.
drummer is Snorre Kirk, and then Magnus
Yes, I
York
see
on
that.
piano.
Snorri and Magnus, yeah. Okay. Yeah, so those are the wonderful musicians that play with Kristin on the album. We don't want to sit here and have this podcast and not acknowledge their contributions.
I'm just so glad that both of you did all of those names and that I didn't even.
Well, I'm just glad that I pronounced them somewhat correctly before
Yeah,
she
you did it. You did all right there, Rex.
Yeah, you did fine.
So let's talk a
it's in
little
my
bit about
DNA.
I've Got a Life. Now, Kristin,
Mhm.
that is one of the two new songs that Dave and Annie did when they did a second greatest hits collection called Ultimate Collection. You know, obviously, you've gone back and looked at these stuff, but that was a single from that when they did this huge remasters of their catalog. But I was reading some stuff about you and this song, and you said, I'm quoting you, as soon as I listened to the song, I knew I could put my spin on it. And I think too, it goes back to what you were saying earlier, that you were looking for something that could uplift you, and that's part of the song, and that it does have some dark moments in it. But talk to me about finding that song, and it sounds like you were kind of excited about again, these lyrics spoke to you.
Yeah, it was one of the first. It was that one and We Tour One that those were the first two that I arranged.
Wow.
Um, and I had tested those on another gig. Um, there was a flute player, Elsa Nilsson, who's a wonderful musician. She's originally Swedish, but she lives in New York. And when I had presented her with the thought of like an Afro-Cuban groove on this, I was like, I want to do some kind of an intro that, the feeling of in this song, because like the lyrics in the beginning are very like, life is just hard and we don't want to see it. We don't want to hear it. I just can't stand it anymore. So, I've got this light. And so I wanted the feeling for me was this arc from beginning to end of the community coming together.
Mhm.
And how do we make that call to say, yeah, like, are you having a hard time? I'm having a hard time too. Yeah,
Mhm.
let's get together. I'll make a cup of tea and let's then oh, you're having a hard time. Well, come on over. And before you know it, like everybody is working together to make the world a better place or to lift each other up and lift, the tide lifts all boats.
Yeah,
So
we need.
how do we get together and do this? And so musically having the like, well, Matthias coming in and, laying down that Afro-Cuban groove and then having the instruments layered in and then building in the collective improvisation and building is so like my voice is just kind of riding on top of this wave of sounds and um, joyous expression.
Yeah, we need a little tenderness. The song says. I mean, and you captured that. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. Um, I'm looking at my notes here about these songs. Oh, so well, we just talked about I Got a Life, and I was going to bring up the harmonic. There's a harmonic on that as well, which is
Yes.
unusual to hear because the original doesn't have one. So that's interesting, and I like that a lot. And I assume that's the same person that was, well,
Yep.
that's obviously the same.
Yeah, Matthias, he
Yeah.
just boy, he was like, "You want what?" I need this groove to go like for a long time. And that's not easy to do because you've got to take a breath, right? Because
Yeah,
there's no,
yeah,
it's
I would
not a
imagine.
keyboard, it's not looped, I mean, that's just him acoustically going, "Cha, cha, chicka, chicka, cha, chicka, cha, cha, chicka, cha." That's a lot of breath.
Yeah,
And
Uh-huh.
so like I'm just so happy with how that turned out.
That's
yes.
great. Yeah, we need to get him and Jimmy Z Zavala, who performed with Eurythmics on a song called Missionary Man, which you probably know from the 80s, did that great harmonica solo. He performed live with them for quite a long time. And we need to get those two harmonica guys together and like what can they do together? Because they're both just, like you said, just extraordinary musicians. So that would be fun. But let's talk about sisters are doing it for themselves. Now, talk about an iconic, we're using that word a lot, but
Mm.
80s, but also uh, female empowerment song. You talked about feeling power earlier in this, and I think Dave Stewart came up with a great groove that he used in that song, but so did you. That is your own, and maybe I bet you can talk about that because you've got a great groove in that song. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, it's all the blues, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's just,
yeah.
and when I think about like that time period, the 80s, it was full. You think about the ads that we watched that were on TV, right? Strong enough for a man, but made for a woman. Uh,
Uh-huh.
the Anjuli, I can bring home the bacon, big dang, fry it up in a pan. And, so there's
That,
all this stuff going on, right? So it's this being strong and when I think like it's a fight a little bit, but one that's not to put anybody down. It's not to, it's just, it's finding our own power. And in the jazz world, when I think of like who was fighting to show his power and to just be in himself, but Charles Mingus. And
Mm.
so that intro that I did, and it kind of came after the fact, like we had played it, and then I was like, oh, wait a minute. There's a song that Charles Mingus wrote called Haitian Fight Song. And that's his intro, that boom, 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 boom. And I thought, just this kind of, and the shuffle thing, it just is like, we're not going back, baby. This is the train is going, and you either get on it or get out of the way, you
Yeah.
know? So for
Yeah.
me, that was kind of the
That's
feeling that I wanted to give in my version of the song.
that's great. I love. I have to tell you, um, Annie Lennox is a huge um, um, campaigner for a lot of women's issues and very important to her. And I think she would very much like your attitude and like what you've done with her music because of how you not only are interpreting her songs, but you're interpreting her um, thoughts and beliefs on what's important.
Mm.
I think you've hit on something.
Mm.
I think you could hit a nerve very well with Annie Lennox.
Yes, I agree with that. Yes, I think she would very much be very pleased with. And I'm sure she's probably heard it. Who knows?
I have no
Well, you
idea.
might know.
I would love to meet her. I just saw a video the other day that from Joni Mitchell singing
Oh, yes.
the
Ladies of the Canyon. Ladies of the Canyon.
yeah, there was they did a thing at Hollywood Bowl not too long ago.
Right.
Right.
Last
Yeah,
week.
with Elton John was
Right.
there, and
Yeah.
Mhm.
it was the same I'm Still Standing, but they did it
Oh,
also
Yes.
in Washington DC. There was a PBS
yeah,
um
Hmm. Right.
yeah.
where Annie, and I mean, just thinking about like all the star power on the bandstand, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Singing and just oh
Yeah. Well, Annie's a huge Joni Mitchell fan and has been since she was
oh
a teenager. So, I'm sure this is very thrilling for her to be invited by Joni to be part of her, Joni Jam, as they call it.
yeah,
But
yeah.
um, but her and Joni, did a version of "Ladies of the Canyon," which is a Joni Mitchell song, which Annie was a B-side from Annie's Medusa album. So the fans know that song from the '90s as a B-side, but to see her singing it now, solo and with Joni Mitchell, is very thrilling because it's a great song, and obviously she loves it, and it's just great to see her. It's great to see her performing and out there. She's been a little silent for a while. So it's good to see her back.
She's a force of nature. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just when I see her performance or both sides now. Oh
Oh,
my
yeah.
God,
Right.
Mm.
just
I
So
know
good.
a friend of mine just called me up recently and said, I just saw an Annie Lennox video from the 80s. Wow, she's a force of nature. I'm
Yeah.
like, you're just realizing this?
But again, Kristen, you mentioned her live cover of Both Sides Now. Again, making that her own.
yep.
And it's what you have to do if you're doing a cover. You know, you yeah, you can just do it the way it was. A lot of people would be fine, but making it your own, whatever the consequence of it is, you've got to be happy with it. You've got to be proud of it. I did love that version that she did. I love the original, of course, everyone does, and I've heard good covers of it too. But I loved how her take on it. She did something very interesting at the end of that song, her live performance. She did the very end of her iconic, again, oh my God, I'm using that over and over, her signature solo song being Why, and she just effortlessly went into it, and she talked about it. I didn't mean to do that. And I think that's the beauty of performance, which you well know. It takes you somewhere else, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I can. And you must have experienced that in those shows you first did with these songs, and when the audience responded to it, that took you somewhere else, didn't it?
Every time I play this music, it's really, really thrilling. And there's always something different that comes out, because it's different people that I'm playing with, or somebody's solo changes because the solos in jazz are never the same.
Uh,
So there might be that same springboard into the start of things, but it's the conversation's different because we're all coming at it on a different day and with different feelings or what happened earlier in the day. So
Yeah.
Why is that about jazz, and in that way that, as you said, you can take that and go any way you want to? It's jazz. That's allowed. Why is that?
well, I mean, there's parameters. It's not, I mean, some could be a free for all. For me, how I view the improvisation is that when I present a song to the band or whoever's playing with me, um, I have a vision of what I want people to feel, or here's my perspective on the lyric. You know, this
Mhm.
is where I want to take this. What does this mean to you?
Mhm.
So it's driven, we make note choices, we solo in different ways, but for me, the driving force in that is what's the message we're trying to get across.
Mhm. Yeah.
So you want to match that in the same tone and the same
Mhm.
feeling.
You covered a song called "I Saved the World Today," which is a single from their album Peace, which was the album after they sort of went their separate ways and they came back 10 years later. And tell us about that song. I know when you read those lyrics, you said, "This is interesting."
Yes. And well, I totally heard a trombone in
Mm.
my brain. Like just Carl, I could Steve Nikolai Hansen, he's such a wonderful trombone player. And I could totally, when I was listening to it, um, I thought it just seemed very clear to me that, because he can do things where he'll be like as a harmony part with a hey, hey, I saved the world today, that he could be as a harmony with me, but then he could go off and improvise, and then he would come back and be a harmony part, and then he could go off. So I could hear those things. Um, it's got that little bit of sadness inside,
Mhm.
but I'm still gonna try anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm. Did when you sort of went in with titles, then you checked out the lyrics. Did you get to some of these songs and were you surprised? Of course, you knew some of these songs. Clearly, you knew some of them. But some of the songs you didn't know, correct? You like "I've Got a Life." You didn't know that song, but some of them you didn't know. Were you surprised when you said, "Okay, I'm going to listen to the song"? Let's press play. Were you surprised at the arrangements? Were you surprised at how they were delivered originally? Anything surprise you?
I'm trying it's been so long now.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Um, I'm trying to think. There was one. Trying to think what it was.
I wondered if it was "I Saved the World Today." Just that it is. I don't think. I'm not saying it was. I think it would be a bit of a surprise sometime. It wasn't the usual thing.
You'll be performing it live and you'll remember it then. Oh, this is what I meant to tell them.
Yeah, because I know, like when I listen to some other things, I'm trying to think if it was the Eurythmic stuff or if it was something else. Um,
Well, let's talk about something else. Let's talk about "Don't Let It Bring You Down," a cover she did on her album Medusa, originally done by oh, uh,
yeah,
who is it,
Neil
people?
Young. Neil
Neil
Young.
Young. What totally went blank. It's the age. Um, so, how did you come? How did you come by? Like, let's do this. How did you find that?
well, the title "Don't Let It Bring You Down" was like,
Yeah.
Then, and then it's like I also love the movie tie-ins.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
with that being an American Beauty, and then
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Put a Little Love in Your Heart was in Scrooged. So I was like, okay, then we have a couple in that zone. Um,
Mhm.
and then just her lyric was just the vocal was so haunting,
Hmm. Yeah.
and I just thought with the chords and everything, I thought, I bet we could do something acoustic with this.
Hmm.
Um, that would be
Yeah,
really
it's her version is very sad and I remember when it came out, I was playing it at work, and one of my coworkers, as soon as the song started, one of my coworkers said, "Whew, that's kind of a downer," because it starts out with that. and it's very sad sounding, but then through as the song goes along, it lifts you up as music does. And this sounds like very similar. We were talking about on nostalgia, similar things where very downbeat sounding things that end up in the end actually lifting you up.
I didn't know I was the only. I thought I was the only person who inflicted my coworkers with paying attention to what I'm playing.
Are you kidding? My number one job in the 80s and 90s was exposing Annie Lennox to everybody. Annie Lennox's music.
I get the feeling, Kristin, too, that you've talked about it, but when you look at the last two songs, Put a Little Love in Your Heart and Lifted, you wanted people to listen to this album and you wanted them to feel lifted. You wanted them to feel something positive. You wanted to make a difference, I think. Am I reading too much into that?
Nope. I was very with the whole album, and it's so weird with like digital world, because like with people just listening to a single here or a single there. For me, when I put a project together, I really feel it in the whole ride that I want people to be on with me in that journey of we're going to go through these songs because I want the emotions to go in these directions, but also have that lifting of spirits and kind of that goodnight kiss at the end.
Right.
Yeah. I'm reading another quote from you. I think you're talking about I've got a life, but you say the world is going through so much right now, but this song fuels my determination to continue fighting for a better future. That's what you're talking about. I think we need that. We all need that right now. So thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there is the festival that I played at, and obviously you've read the liner notes. Lifted, I don't know that it's my favorite song of the whole bunch, but I have some really intense experiences with that song. When I did it at this festival, the festival was in Tel Aviv, Israel, and it was the last song we did for the concert. And live, I'd closed it was a little different arrangement, but the whole idea for me was like, and I didn't know what was going to happen. It was the 6th of October, and I had the last concert of that festival.
You're
And
kidding.
no,
Wow.
no. And so we ended as the audience, the band members were going, keep on lifted. And the different band members were leaving the stage. So at the very end, it was just me and the audience singing together.
Chills,
And
Kristin, chills. Yeah.
I think that was those were the last notes. And then the next day, the world fell apart.
Yeah. That's chilling. That is. Yeah.
So it took
what
my
a
husband
memory for you.
It was intense, and it took us 2 days to get out of there, to get a plane that would fly out. The flight wasn't canceled, and that was the song my husband and I sang to each other. Luckily he was there with me, but we sang that song to each other like all weekend long. That was the thing that kept our hearts afloat.
Really?
Wow.
That's extraordinary.
That is extraordinary.
I mean, you'll have that memory and so many memories from that forever. That's just intense. Really, really intense. Wow.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
Well, we've been going on for about an hour now. Maybe we should think about winding it down.
Well, let's talk about one more song. What I Lie to You.
Sure.
That's their great iconic. Oh, look at me! I do have a different vocabulary. I'm a writer.
What?
But I mean, it's one of their signature hits.
Was that the word of the day on your calendar today? Iconic.
It must be. I'll have to look it up. Can you edit some of that out? Jeez. What you knew that song. Clearly you knew that song from MTV. Everybody did. But kind of rock song. What drew you to that one?
It's all blues. It's seriously, I mean,
Yeah,
like, it's
yeah.
all, it goes back to the blues again. And because I had Matthias there, and, I thought of all the songs, what would be the one that would have the expectation of a large ensemble? And I'm
Mhm.
not going to do that, and with the adult eyes of, you know, my friends know what's in store. I'm not going to be here anymore. I've packed my bags. I'm out. Would I lie to you? Come on. Really, would I lie to you? Would I say something that wasn't true? So it's kind of that I don't have to be I don't have to shout it from the mountaintops. I can just lay that bass in the button and to have that be the reference to the song, but it's acoustic bass, and then just with the harmonica, and then just let him cut loose for a while. It's just like, yeah, this is
Mhm.
this is what it needs to be.
It's so
It's
cool.
a
Of
great
course,
arrangement.
Dave Stewart talks about having, he was influenced by his brother who introduced him to the blues. And, it's interesting that how it has influenced so many genres. And, all us little kids from the 80s, we had no idea when we listened to Dave and Annie that we were being introduced to the blues. But we were.
Yeah, well, with all the digital sounds and the layers and all that,
Mhm.
it hit it.
Yeah.
You've got this amazing little these gems. Uh,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
beautiful things
I,
in the music that it has this other sensibility, because like the 80s was all the keyboards and digital stuff, so it's,
right.
but at its core,
Yeah.
that's
I always felt like Eurythmics music was teaching me something when I was a
Mm.
kid. Because I was young. I didn't know a lot about all kinds of music, and I always felt that each album, because it was a different style, was teaching me things. And so that comment you made, Kristen, that kind of hits home because, or Mark, maybe you said that, about, yeah, you just feel like what did you say? You were learning something, or you were being introduced to something, or when she was mentioning the blues, and like you were saying,
Well,
we didn't know we were listening to this music that was so rooted in all this stuff.
yeah,
We know it now because we're older and more sophisticated, but
well, I don't know. I've used the same word over and over. I don't know how sophisticated I am, people. Let's face it.
well, let's just point out that Mark is a real journalist, and was and I'm just a podcaster. So there we go. I just gave you props.
Okay, forget that.
You're
Okay.
so iconic, Mark.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yes, it's so true.
Anyhow, back to
So,
Kristen.
Kristin, what again, as Rex said earlier, this is basically a conversation that our podcast is basically a conversation that Rex and I have. We have no idea where
Well,
we're going.
that's how they came about. We thought we enjoy our conversations. Maybe somebody else will too.
Well, yeah, we won't go. So, Kristin, what haven't we asked you that you would like to tell people about your album, about your music, about yourself? What haven't we asked you?
um
That's an easy question, right?
well, I hope people will check it out, whether it's on their favorite digital platform, or if they like hard copies, we do actually sell physical copies
Yeah.
through
Good for
Band
you.
and all that. Yeah, because you never know.
Okay.
Some
You don't
people
have one in front of you, do you?
oh,
I was going to
goodness.
say, hold it up. We'll show people. We'll show people. Don't worry.
I
Well,
can
you know what I'm going to do at the end of the video, if you don't mind, Kristen, I'll put a picture of the album.
That'd be
So when
great.
the podcast is over, people will see the album,
Perfect.
and
Can I
obviously they'll know it because I'm saying it.
can I ask you a question about the cover, because I really like it.
Sure.
I like the concept of it, and I kind of want you to explain it just a little bit.
I
That you
bet. I'm so glad you asked about that.
Oh,
Okay? Well,
good.
just go ahead and just do it. Yeah. Tell us.
So this Sweet Dreams is out on Giant Sheep Music, and the woman that is the marketing force, she is a force of nature as well, Susanna Bentz. And when we were talking about the imagery with this album, she made these amazing, not dream boards, but these poster things, like where she took all of those iconic um, images of Annie, and said, let's take all the color from like her hair, the lips, these really bright, intense colors, but put them into suits. So not
Mhm.
into my hair, not into, not to be her, but again, that extraction of, okay, what does that power mean? 80s and the power suits. I mean, I don't have the shoulder pads, but those really intense colors. And so like bright red, I have an orange jacket set. I have a hot pink, and then with that yellow t-shirt underneath. The whole idea is that that power is going to be in the suits.
I
And
love that. And
Yeah.
again, I think you are channeling Annie Lennox a lot here, because there's nothing, if and the art of the album, the video, whatever it is, there's a reason for it. It's not, and I love that you had this same concept of the album cover. That there were things that you knew, and maybe we would pick up on it, but you knew what these colors meant, and there was a specific reason for it. I
yeah.
love that.
Well,
Yeah.
and Susanna put this amazing team together. The makeup and hair artist, and Lulu, she's like just so cool, and she really was into the project. And then Sophia Barfold did the pictures, and it was just, I felt like I had the dream team, so we were playing Eurythmics tunes, and and you've got the little board trying to get the wind in my hair, and it was just so much fun to be around these strong women who are just creative and fun, and so good at what they do, and then to take those shots and then put in that kind of raindrop thing, that layer
Yeah.
to over all the pictures, to really like unify
Yeah.
all the shots.
And of course, Eurythmics fans will recognize the red star and the
Yeah.
fonts,
Yeah.
which is so iconic. And
Yeah, you did that for real. Yes.
yeah, so that's great too. Yeah, I really think that this is something that I think a lot of Eurythmics fans will really appreciate and treasure, especially now that we're all of a certain age. We're not 20 years old anymore. I think a
Yeah.
lot of us are probably listening to things a bit more. Here I go again. I'm using sophisticated a lot. You used iconic.
And Kristin used force of nature a lot. So what I want people to do,
Yeah.
what I want people to do is have a drinking game with this podcast. Sophisticated, iconic, or force of nature, you have to take a drink. Okay. So
Perfect.
I think iconic gets the
well,
gets
okay,
the
you may be tipsy if that's the word you choose. We'll have to tell people at the beginning of this you've got three choices or something.
Yeah.
Chris, for me, I want to say this has been one of my favorite podcasts. You're really just a delight.
Oh, thank you.
I will
love
echo that
talking
as
to
well.
you.
Yes.
And just I love your album. I'd love talking to you about your album. And thank you for doing this. And I
Yes.
hope people do check it out. Yeah, it's great. Thank you.
I'm so glad you reached out. It's just been a total joy to be with you. And I love the way you guys have listened to the music and
Oh,
found the Easter eggs in a way,
well,
that
yeah.
I mean, you can't talk to somebody without listening to the music, right?
but
I suppose you could, but
I
that's not how we operate.
I appreciate that. I'm just saying not everybody does that. And so I really appreciate the care and attention that you.
Well, thank you. And I'm sure that it must be frustrating to do an interview where the interviewer has not even listened to your record or doesn't really know anything about it, or just quickly got some information 5 minutes before they interviewed you. That must be a frustrating thing.
I did an interview once where with a new CD, and the person said, "And who's playing bass?" I was like,
Oh, that I forgot to ask you. Now, Kristin, who sings on your album?
yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Well,
Yeah.
it is good to hear your voice, and the incredible bass that you do play. That's I love too the album cover that you've got your bass. So that's fantastic. Yeah. Well, all right. Anything else, Rex?
Well, I'm thinking maybe if Kristin would like to join us at some point in the future for another podcast, like maybe after you do that tour with the big band reinterpretations or something like that, we could talk
Sure.
again.
That would
And
be
by that
awesome.
time I'm sorry, go ahead.
That'd be great. I would love to do that, and maybe I would even be in California.
Oh, okay, cool.
No,
And
well, better mention I'm on the East Coast. I'm on the coast of South Carolina. So if you come there, let me know. Okay.
Guys, fare okay?
I'm sorry.
Did your family do okay with the hurricane?
Yeah, it didn't hit us on the coast at all. But I actually have family in Tennessee, and where it was one of the worst places that it hit was there. They were not in direct line of the flooding, but the town where I was a newspaper publisher for 13 years really got slammed. And so, but we on the coast, we didn't really feel it at all, which is fascinating, which is the fascinating thing about, these storms these days and the tracks that they're taking and the power that they have. And we can't really know what's going on. We live in a different time.
And you guys have been through how many hurricanes in the last several years? It seems like there's
always too
4
many.
or 5.
I live in fear from the beginning of hurricane season to the end, and it's not over yet. Hurricane season goes through the end of November, so I'm always watching. But anyway, but thank you for asking. But no, we're good. So yeah.
Glad to hear that.
All right. Well, thank you, Kristin. We really enjoyed this.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, you guys.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay.